Well, hello and welcome. You find yourself checking out the SIG Tango 6 3 to 18 by 44, featuring an illuminated MRAD reticle and the Levelplex anti-cant system. This scope being a first focal plane, as we change the magnification, which you'll see soon, the reticle will change size according to keep it to scale. I had already pointed that little shadow area in the top left. You're going to be noticing that for the rest of the video. Illumination here is at full, and as we take it to the maximum magnification of 18x, you'll see, of course, the reticle gets larger. With the lights off, you can see that there is very little to no illumination bleed, which is good because when you're in darker environments, the last thing you want is to not be able to make out your reticle. Speaking of reticles, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I do like the finite center dot for aiming, but as far as the rest of it goes, it's just not that inspiring. But you know what? It's simple and it'll work. Let's see how the turrets are. Alright, so a couple things to get off my chest real quick. I bought this properly used. The gentleman that owned this before me used this in competition, and it was covered in dust when I got it. So, as far as the turrets not feeling or seeming as tight as usual, I can relate some of it to that. However, there are some nice features about this that I do like. They do lock and they do show your rotation so you know where your zero is, but I don't like how the datum lines don't go all the way to the bottom of the cap. As a result, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where you're lining up. If they went all the way down, it would be much easier to read. As far as how these sound and how these feel, this is just a very used scope, and I'm going to leave it with that. I feel if this was brand new, it would feel a lot better than what it currently does. With that, let's see how this thing tracks and see how that Levelplex system works.
All right, I'm very excited to formally announce this. It's going to be the first video, or at least so I think it's going to be the first video, showcasing the Mark II target tracking system. Or setup. I just want to sound fancy. So here we are, 3x. We're going to zoom all the way into its maximum of 18x. You can see that we have a lot going on with this new target. So it's properly set up for when you mill up, the reticle goes down. Now I'm going to specify this for the first couple of videos. The numbers on the side correspond to the circle on the inside of the paper that's just above the number. So for example, the 1 inch on either side, that circle just above that is 1 inch. Then 3/4, ½ inch, 3/8, and 1/4 inch. Also, those numbers are that height. So the number 1 is 1 inch high, the ½ inch is ½ inch high, and the 1/4 inch is 1/4 inch high. I adjust the camera settings a little bit to take out some of the washout, so hopefully you have a slightly better image. Illumination at full is very bright on this scope, and there's no offs in between. Just want to cycle through that until I get to the off, which is right there. And let's give this a crank, shall we? I got to pay very close attention because these turrets do not make that much sound, so I have to count every single click as well as try to count it off to the side, which could be quite challenging. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we're 4 mils over and 3 mils down, and so far, so good. Let's reset this back to 0. That resets properly fine, and let's just keep on cranking up the elevation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it gets a little bit fuzzy at 10 mils of added elevation. It looks like we're about 0.1 of a mil off at 10 mils, which is only 1%, because there's 10 clicks per mil and there's 10 mils total elevation here. So I think 1% is more than adequate for my standards. So fantastic. There you have it. So you just saw the tracking test. One thing I completely forgot is that this scope has a leveling system. So what you do is you push the illumination knob in. You should have both those arrows light up. And now we're going to see just how far we have to turn this before it tells you that you're off level. So look at that. We barely nudge this and it's already able to tell that we're off level. Let's go the other way. Look at that. That is fantastic. I'm going to try to keep it as centered as I can. I loosened up the rings on this and all I'm doing is rotating the scope body. But let's see, that's pretty level and that's extremely accurate. But keep in mind, we're perfectly level right now. But the fact that it actually is working to that sort of tolerance is a truly awesome feature that I've never seen on another. Well, I know that scopes have it, but this is the first one I'm getting my hands on. Yeah, that's awesome. See if we go really far. Nope, it'll just tell you come up on that side. And that's it. And there's basically perfect level. Looks good to me.
So as you can see, it tracks really, really well. 1% across 10 mils, in my opinion, is perfectly fine and probably well within the specs of most manufacturers. The LevelPlex system works extremely well and is a really nice feature, but you know what, so is a good bubble level. Illumination is going on full, and as you can see in the top part of the hemisphere, there is a shadow cast that I pointed out earlier. However, once you go past 3.5 to 4x, it disappears completely. And if you're actually behind this thing looking through it, you're not even going to notice the shadow, primarily because your head's going to adjust to compensate for that. The only reason why you're seeing it in the video is because my camera is completely rigid mount to it, and it doesn't have the finite flex to get rid of it. I have noticed that on a couple of other scopes, but this one seems to be the most significant. Anyway, illumination here at full in the daytime is actually pretty good, one of the better performances from one of these mid-range magnification scopes that I've got my hands on. As far as how image quality looks here at a 30-yard power transformer, I have to say it's okay. It seems a little bit soft to my eye. It could be just a matter of the lighting, but as you'll see throughout the rest of the video, it's not, in my opinion, the most incredible sort of image quality you'll ever see, especially given the price of this thing. Yes, this particular model in this case is discontinued, but you could still buy this exact scope with a different reticle for around $1,400 brand new. We're going to talk about this more later, but in my opinion, this scope falls in a bit of a gray zone between scopes, but more on that later. Pushing back to 400 yards, we focus our attention at the 80-inch tall steel door. I get the image as focused as can be, but for some reason here, and with this lighting, it just seems very soft. You'll also note at the bottom of the parapet wall, we do have some chromatic aberration, but it's green chromatic aberration. I've never seen green before. Usually it's purple, and it's not as obvious. In fact, looking at this image overall, it does seem like there's a bit of a slight green hue to everything. I don't know if that's the lighting, the scope, or a bit of both. As we pan across the top of the parapet wall, you'll still note that it's there. I don't know if this is something to do with just the glass, the focus, the lighting, or a bit of a combination of everything. The dead trees are a bit of a muddled mess, and as we go down, you can see a little bit of purple fringing creeping up from the top of that wall right there. I adjust the focus ever so slightly, and you know what? The parapet wall looks a lot better until we start focusing on the steel door again, in which case you could see it popping up right down there at the bottom. Anyway, we're going to pull out the magnification. We're going to focus on one of those power transformers out at about 800 to 900 yards. The side focus on this scope goes to about 300 yards, then to infinity really, really quickly. So once you get it around 300-400 yards, anything beyond that should be pretty much in focus, as you can see right here at this power tower. It honestly looks pretty damn good, better than how the top of the roof looked. I don't know if it has to do with just the bricks being so similarly colored or what, but here, in my opinion, it looks a little bit better than it was before. Anyway, let's take a look at 1,000 yards and see how it looks there. With the magnification backed up to 3x again, you can see the shadow creeping on the top part of the image. Again, this is due to the fact that everything is so rigid, but to the naked eye, you're not going to notice it as much, if at all. So don't let that be a big concern for you. I zoom in to take the scope to its maximum magnification of 18x, and you're going to notice that there's a lot of mirage going on. That's because it's about 20 degrees outside when I filmed this, and I had my window open to get it as clear as possible. So the resulting hot air versus cold air creates mirage, and that is what you see here. Illumination here at full, again, is very noticeable. Despite the fact it's getting a little bit darker in the day, this scope still performs much better than a lot of other mid-tier magnification scopes like this. It is nice to see SIG make a scope that you could actually see the illumination for once. I close the window and all of a sudden the mirage disappears. So for anyone that asks why I usually film through a window, there you go, to get an actual sharper image. Not to be confused with the store though, different sharper image. Anyway, it looks pretty good at 1,000 yards. However, it's nothing really to write home about. I add 10 mils of elevation like I do for all of these videos, and I center everything back in frame. Image here is actually fairly consistent with what we saw at the target tracking test. Added 10 mils of elevation and it seems a little bit softer than usual. So all in all, if you're going to be adding 10 mils of elevation, expect your image quality to degrade slightly. And if you want to look at the moon with it, well, again, it still seems pretty soft. So don't be looking at the moon through one of these and expecting to see a crystal clear image. It's just not really going to happen. It is a cool shot, though. Speaking of cool shots, when I think of cool, I think of heavy snow. And we're just going to sit here and take a look at that, and I'm going to talk about where I feel the scope fits in the market. I am, of course, going to be comparing this to probably its main competitor, which is going to be the Razer HD Gen 2 3-18x50, which I have reviewed non infinitum on this channel and brought up for good reason. They're phenomenal scopes. But those are about $300 to $400 more expensive than one of these, if we're going for new prices here. And this is about $300 or $400 more expensive than a comparable PST Gen 2, maybe $500. So it's really in between those two scopes. Now, I understand that there are other options out there, but I'm just keeping it simple for right now. I really feel this scope doesn't really do anything so good that you would go with this over one of those, with the exception of the Levelplex, which works, as you saw, extremely well. And you don't have to worry about killing your battery because it'll automatically shut off after 2 minutes. But I think for the price, you could either save more money and get a scope that performs optically just as well with the same sort of front objective so you don't have to worry about clearance, or spend a little bit more money and get something that's optically superior. And it's not just with those two, there's a lot of other options out there. This is just in a bit of a gray zone. From the gray zone to the danger zone, here at 50 yards at my local small bore range, again at 3x you can see that shadow at the top part of the hemisphere. Illumination here is at full, but it's extremely bright. You can't really expect to see illumination on a really bright day like this on a scope of this sort of, magnification range. Speaking of magnification range, the magnification ring feels great on this scope. In fact, all of the turrets themselves feel great. The knurling is very sharp and very positive, so you know that you're on it, you know that you're turning it with little force of having to squeeze something to turn it. But the illumination ring and both the windage and elevation turrets do seem mushy. The magnification ring and the parallax adjustment do feel extremely good. It feels like they're rolling on ball bearings. I brought it up in the video already, but the side focus on this thing is quite sensitive because it has a very large range over very small motion. So if you make a very minor adjustment, you're changing where your focus point is rather quite dramatically. It can make getting on target a little bit of a nuisance. With that being said though, here at 50 yards, the steel looks quite good. Pan across, you could see a lot of the imperfections on all the faces from being whacked with, unfortunately, larger calibers than 22 LR, deforming mild steel quite easily at 50 yards. I pan across the paper to see if we can notice some 22 LR holes at 50 yards, because for me, that is very important. I do a lot of my rimfire shooting at 50 yards or farther, so being able to focus down this close is a nice touch. Not every scope will be able to focus 50 yards or closer. In fact, a lot of them that are usually older ones, but typically like 4 to 16s with 4x magnification ranges, are 50 meters, at least from Steiner, so keep that in mind. Anyway, the image quality here is pretty good. You can make out the holes in both the white and the black part of the bull quite easily. There's also basically no chromatic aberration to speak of. Maybe there's a slight bit of a green hue like I was talking about earlier, but other than that, you can very easily make out those holes, and for me, that's perfectly fine. The center dot on this reticle, again, is probably my favorite part of the overall reticle. Nothing else is really screams at me like, oh, this is special or really usable, but you know what? That center dot really is. Anyway, pew pew, pew pew, pew pew, pew pew, pew pew. Ah, you thought I'd forget about that, huh? No, I gotta give you guys some pew-pews. Sorry. Anyway, eye box test is another area where this scope sort of falls on its face a little bit. 3x here is nothing spectacular. I was expecting a little bit bigger than what it is. Yeah, you can get back and you can still see through it a little bit, but look at how much everything seems to be warping and twisting when we're, off perfect center. It is not that great of a performance, especially, again, for the price. 10x here is tight. No way around it. I would say it's a little bit tighter than what you'd see with a PST Gen 2 or a Meopta Optica 6, so keep that in mind, because those are two scopes that are less expensive than this that I feel are personally superior in almost every single facet of the imagination. 18X. And of course, there's no difference here at 18x. It is very, very tight. I can barely figure out where to hold the camera just to be able to look through it, let alone look through it well. So one of those things where, yes, this is a 34mm tube, but with a 44mm front objective, it's just not a very good combination. I understand if you need the 44mm front objective to clear like a barrel or something like that, but again, a PST is cheaper and better. Moving on, we find ourselves at the 100-yard large bore range, and you can still see a little bit of shadow up there at the top, but you know what, we're just going to zoom past it and not even talk about it. We focus our attention at this 100-yard paper target, and I get the side focus as properly set up as possible. It looks good, just good. Unfortunately, with the brown berm in the background, it sort of blends all the colors together, and it doesn't make it really stand out or look special or vibrant or anything like that. You can see that I turned on the level plex because there are arrows telling you which side to bring up, which, again, the system works phenomenally well. Steel target in the 180 or so yard berm is very visible because it's bright. You can see a bit of the imperfections on the face, and the berm itself looks pretty good. On our way to the 200-yard paper targets, and I get lost because I didn't back the magnification out to figure out where the hell I was. Just another one of the instances where more magnification is not necessarily better. You have to be able to find your target before you can even, focus on it. Anyway, the level plex is telling us we have to come up on the left, but I'm not going to worry about that. And the paper here actually looks surprisingly good. You can make out some 22 LR holes on the 7/8 ring to the top right part of the paper, and it's honestly looks pretty damn good. There's basically zero chromatic aberration. You can make out a lot of the detail on the weeds that are back there. It is just a good looking image. It's a real shame because I expected the scope to look that good in every environment, not just one. Anyway, we focus our attention at the 300-yard steel targets, and we're going to be shooting to the far right, both with a 223 and a 22 LR. My range buddy N and I are going to be shooting from this position and then a position farther down the line where we get a little bit more squared up to the targets. Here the image again looks pretty good. The level plex is telling me that I have to bring the left edge of the scope up to be perfectly level, which is extremely nice to see. And the illumination is still performing fairly well even though we're in direct sunlight. So while my friend N and I keep shooting up the steel targets, I'm going to say a couple things that I didn't get the chance to during this entire video. One, you see a lot of the scope body. 2, the field of view through it isn't that impressive. And 3, the scope is actually very far away from you to be able to look through it. The exit pupil on this thing is a lot farther away than any other scope that I've got my hands on. And I think that has something to do with why the eye box is so tight, why the field of view is not the best, and why you see so much of the scope body. And for me personally, I would use those 3 reasons as excuses to either save money and go with a product that has a few less features but performs a little bit better, or spend more money and get something that performs even better. And with that, let's get into my final thoughts. So here we are. No, I didn't break my finger. I sliced the top of it open working on my car last night, and I have it sort of splinted so this way I don't flex it and then crack the scab and bleed out profusely like I was last night. This is a bit of a letdown. It is a fairly expensive scope, $13-ish, $100, granted with a different reticle on the newer versions, and they're black, not gray. I don't know if you can still find one of these, but I don't think I would recommend this right off the bat. Now, this does have more features than almost any other scope I've got my hands on, primarily because the level system, which, as you can see, is right here. You push it, like so, and you activate it. I would give this up to have better glass.
and to have turrets that I would know that in the future would not be as mushy as what they are currently. They sound okay, but there's a lot of play. It's so mushy, so mushy. Now, this thing does look awfully short, and it is fairly short, but it's not light. Weight-wise, it's only a couple ounces off a Razer HD Gen 2. And to give you an idea, Optica 6 with a Bobro mount is as near as makes no difference the same weight. Another comparison I would make is the PST Gen 2, again in a Bobro mount, which is actually even lighter. Now, there isn't much else to really say. I've mentioned that this is used, I've mentioned it's still in pretty good shape, but the turrets don't feel that good. Now, that could be on every other SIG Tango 6 3-18 that there is out there, or just this particular model from being so used. Please let me know in the comments if you have one of these and are experiencing the similar sort of feel from these turrets. If I was spending $1,300 on a scope like this, I'd much rather save some money and get really nice mounts and maybe even some ammunition on the side and go with one of these two options right here. Now, they don't have as many great features as this thing does, but you know what they do? They just work. Now, no one sent this in for review, but I still have to thank all of you, my viewers, and especially all of you, my Patreon providers, for making this video partly possible. I spent my own money on this, thinking that this would be really, really, really good. So it is with a heavy heart that I have to say that I'm quite disappointed in it. Do I recommend it? Only if what you're looking for, this scope provides. Other than that, no. Save your money elsewhere or spend your money on something else. This is the 4.5 to 27, but you could find these used for a little bit more money than what this thing comes in at. And with that, thank you very much for watching. See you again next time.
And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.